Hello! Happy 2021. I'm Derek, co-host of the Bonus Commentary podcast, and I am the one who nerds. Why yes, I did come up with that after watching Breaking Bad. Why do you ask? Since we're all stuck inside, I thought it would be a good time to take a look at something very near and dear to me personally. And with Godzilla vs. Kong coming up in a couple of weeks, I thought this would be a perfect time to do a retrospective. However, upon realizing my want to do a retrospective, I came to a very stunning conclusion. Everyone had already done one. God, this is really hard to do. I'm willing to bet with one or two of these videos or podcasts, you'd find every bit of production history you'd ever want to know, down to the director's bowel movements. But this isn't a jab at anybody. In fact, it's very refreshing. Growing up, Godzilla was very much my thing. I was the only one who ever knew about the franchise, it seemed. Nobody ever talked about it, nobody had ever seen one. They knew the name, but not much else beyond that. So to find out that there was a community was very awesome. So I didn't want to take away from anybody, and I didn't want to repeat what everybody else had already said. I was originally thinking about making a What Godzilla Means to Me video, but that seemed so hackney and corny, it just didn't want to work. Then I thought of something else, and I don't know if it's going to be equally as hackney and corny, but let's see. I'm going to mix Godzilla with my love of D&D. Boy oh boy do I have work to do. In my research for making a retrospective, I noticed that neither community really talks about each other too much. There are Godzilla stat blocks aplenty out there, but you never see anything for the other monsters. And there's some great potential here, not just visually, but also in their abilities, the way they act. This is kind of an untapped inkwell. So this is my attempt at a retrospective. This is Godzilla meets D&D. If this is somehow your first dive into the Godzilla franchise, I recommend you actually go check out Titan Goji. The videos themselves are short, succinct, and to the point, and frankly, his videos were my introduction to the fandom. So please, go give his videos a look if you haven't already. Freaking do it. Well, with introductions out of the way, let's take that cinematic time machine to 1954's Gojira. There's a chance you may not have expected something so somber to begin with, huh? I believe if I'm going to do this properly, we need to discuss where it all comes from. If I'm somehow the first person to tell you this, Godzilla's origins stem from the atomic bomb. 9 years after the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, Japan was the first society to experience the horrors of nuclear warfare, and they were told to keep silent about it from the US. So instead of being direct, making a film about the horrors witnessed by the people of Japan, they went and made something a little bit more allegorical, while being an undeniable symbol of what had transpired. This bit of subtle filmmaking proved to be a success, so much so the country that even silenced them in the first place embraced the creation a couple of years later with the creation of Godzilla, King of the Monsters in 1956. After hydrogen bomb testing in the ocean, fishing vessels begin disappearing in blinding flashes of light. The investigation of these disappearances leads to Odo Island, where the villagers know the culprit responsible: Godzilla, an ancient sea creature. A group led by paleontologist Dr. Kyohei Yaname follows the acts of the creature in hopes of studying it further. His daughter Emiko and her boyfriend Hideto Ogata watch in horror as Tokyo is razed to the ground, as no conventional weapons seem to be able to pause the creature. Emiko, however, knows of someone who can help: Dr. Shirazawa, a brilliant scientist with a weapon capable of slaying the beast, the oxygen destroyer. However, Dr. Shirazawa is reluctant to use such a weapon and fears that it will be just like the atomic bomb that started this whole mess in the first place. Eventually, he is convinced by Emiko and Ogata. He destroys his notes willingly and sacrifices his life to kill the titular monster and save Tokyo. However, this is not the end.
もし水爆実験が続けて行われるとしたら、ゴジラの盗塁が。
And I think we all know how that song and dance goes. The overall tone of the feature is one of tension, remorse, and a call to stop this thing from ever happening again. The black and white only serve the film, making scenes of destruction even more devastating as heavy saturations and blacks add to the mood. If you haven't seen this film already, I absolutely urge you to do so. At the time of writing this script, you can see it on the streaming service HBO Max, for as long as they decide to keep that name, Amazon Prime, something called Sling TV, and even right here on YouTube. If you prefer your media in the physical form, Criterion has released this big old book of the Showa-era Godzilla films, and if that's more than you're willing to sign on for, there is the standalone plus the 1956 King of the Monsters. This film is so very important for the ideas it conveys. I believe that it should be taught in every class around the globe for its heavy anti-nuclear message. Perhaps one day we can look back on these movies with a sigh of relief that humanity has finally learned its lesson. Or perhaps I'm being too optimistic. As a relatively new dungeon master myself, I've seen Godzilla stat blocks over the many corners of the internet, and I've been half tempted to use them in-game, but I've never had a party high enough level to go up against anything even remotely close to other homebrews. However, there actually stands in the monster manual a proper fill-in beast that at the mere mention of its name can cause a player to ask horrified, "Why?"
The Tarask.
If you want a brief, pretty damn funny rundown of the creature, I suggest you go check out RuneSmith. He has a great rundown video of the Tarask, and it is absolutely worth a watch. But for those of you who are recent victims of the hands just coming off virus slowly incapacitating Americans everywhere, I'll break it down for you. It has an armor class of 25. This is perfect. This means that it can bounce off most attacks like ballista and regular conventional weapons. Hit points? Check. Godlike strength, constitution, pretty much all forms of damage immunities? Check, check, and check. Has 3 you missed a day. A reflective carapace for anti-magic goodness. This is an amazing start for what we're trying to convey. It's big, it's nasty. There's very little you can do about it. For Godzilla, I'm gonna go ahead and keep all of this. In fact, the only changes come in the form of its horn attack and swallow attack, in that I'll be taking them out, as Godzilla is never seen using his dorsal fins to do damage, and never actually attempts to eat anyone. However, when you take something out, you generally want to put something back. So I'm going to do something that no player ever wants to hear. I'm giving the Tarask a breath weapon. To better mimic Godzilla's atomic breath, it would be best to use fire as the element you might expect. Nuclear breath isn't exactly on the high fantasy list of damage types. And since I'm feeling a little feisty, I'm going to fuse in some extra necrotic damage to better mold this into the awful nature that is nuclear devastation. First, I'm going to pull from an ancient red dragon, and for the necrotic damage, I'm going to use a young shadow dragon. There is also one last thing. Godzilla's radioactive trail does actually do damage to the people around it, so I suggest adding something that looks a little like this. In terms of making him look the part, you only need to flavor him to the best of your abilities. With such a devastating creature, it might seem impossible to fight back. And unfortunately with this monster, that's kind of the point. However, he was put down by a single human, Dr. Shirazawa. And for the sake of argument, I suggest we roll him up, make him an artificer, since he did use a device to slay the beast, instead of say a plunging blow to the head or something. I'll roll up a character sheet and put him here. With something as all-encompassing as Godzilla, you can easily have him star in his own campaign of crushing cities. The players could attempt and fail to put him down. I would suggest a higher level party so they don't rot away from the poisoning in the first few hours of contact. They could get stronger, learn about the creature, perhaps clearing out cities and saving as many lives as they can. They suffer and fight until they come across a lone non-player character. An artificer who's heard tales of the coming danger of this monster, but refuses to use his weapon on the creature. You could feasibly have your characters attempt to persuade him to use this devastating weapon against the creature. Have him create a weapon so strong that it can actually kill the creature. Perhaps the players have to defend him as he uses the weapon to end the beast's life once and for all. There is so much you can do. Imagine recreating this entire situation. With such a creation, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on Godzilla? What are your opinions on the stats? What did you like or dislike about the video? I'm new at this, let me know, man. I will say thank you very much for sticking with me all the way through to the end of this video. My hope is that I convert some people who really love Toku, go out and play D&D, and I hope people that really like D&D have now decided to give the Godzilla franchise a look. Make sure to send love to everybody I recommended here today. Let them know I sent you, and please, Be sure to take care of yourselves out there. Next week, I plan on covering the next entry in the Godzilla franchise. Godzilla raids again. Prepare yourself for the best boy to get some limelight, not the blast light.